You'll leave like everyone else.
My name is Thomas, and I'm someone who drifts. I never stayed in jobs longer than a year. I never committed to relationships. I never lived anywhere long enough to know my neighbors' names. It wasn't recklessness. Exactly. It was more like a learned behavior. If you don't put down roots, you can't be disappointed when you have to leave. Moving on was just what I did. The job posting was simple. Live-in caregiver needed for a 6-week contract. Flexible hours, good pay, and I wouldn't have to commit to anything beyond 6 weeks. It seemed perfect, almost like it was written for someone exactly like me. The agency briefed me on the way over. The client's name was Olivia. She was 31 years old, had been in a car accident 7 years ago that left her partially paralyzed. She used a wheelchair for longer distances, but she could walk short distances with a walker on good days. She lived alone in a house in Seattle that was modified for accessibility. She needed help with physical therapy exercises, transportation, and some assistance with activities of daily living. The briefing was clinical, professional, and completely failed to prepare me for what I would actually find. The house was a beautiful craftsman on Capitol Hill, the kind of place with character and history. The door opened before I could knock, and there she was. Olivia was striking in a way that made me pause. She had sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in a single glance, and a controlled intensity that felt almost dangerous. She was holding onto the frame of the door for balance, and she wasn't smiling. "You're here," she said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an observation. "Thomas," I said, extending my hand. I know who you are," she interrupted. "The agency sent your file. Come in. We need to go over some things." She turned, not toward me, but deeper into the house, and I realized she was moving, walking with what looked like considerable effort toward the kitchen. Her right leg moved stiffly, and she gripped onto furniture as she went, but she moved with determination, like she was proving something to herself with every step. I followed, wheeling my single suitcase behind me. The kitchen was modern and accessible, everything positioned carefully for someone in a wheelchair. There was a folder on the table, and Olivia lowered herself into a chair with a kind of precise movement that suggested she'd been doing this long enough to have perfected it. "Here's what you need to know," she said, opening the folder. "I have a physical therapist who comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You'll be here for those appointments. I need help with my stretches on the other days. There's a meal plan I follow. I'll show you the kitchen. I have appointments around the city, and you'll drive me. I get migraines sometimes, and when I do, I'll need you to handle the household things. And there are standing rules." She paused, looking directly at me. "No pity," she continued. "I don't want sympathy. I don't want you to pretend my disability doesn't exist, and I don't want you to treat me like I'm fragile. I want you to treat me like I'm a person who has a specific set of needs. Can you do that?" "Yeah," I said. "Of course." "Good," she said. "Also, you should know that the last 3 caregivers left before their contracts were up. The first one couldn't handle the emotional labor of my attitude. The second one found the job more physically demanding than expected. The third one—" She paused, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across her face, something like hurt. "The third one took a job somewhere else. They all leave, so don't get attached. In 6 weeks, you'll be gone, and I'll find someone else." There was something about the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so resigned, that made me understand this wasn't bitterness. This was armor. This was Olivia protecting herself from the inevitable disappointment of someone leaving. "I'll be here," I said simply. She looked at me for a long moment. "You say that now." The first week was hard, not in the way I'd expected. Physically, yes, I helped Olivia with her stretches, learned the proper techniques from her physical therapist, and drove her to various appointments around the city. But the hard part was Olivia herself. She was guarded in a way that seemed almost aggressive. She corrected me constantly, not in a mean way, but in a precise way. "No, the stretch should go further. I can handle more than that. You're being too careful with the walker. I won't break. I don't need you to help me into the shower. I can do that myself." She was testing me, pushing to see if I'd get frustrated, if I'd leave. And I recognized that impulse because I'd done it myself countless times, made myself difficult to love because a rejection would hurt less than being left by someone who did. By the second week, something shifted. We were sitting on the back porch one evening. She had insisted on being pushed out there despite the difficulty of getting her wheelchair over the threshold, and we were both quiet, watching the city lights come on as the sun set. "You're still here," she said quietly. It sounded almost like a question. I said I would be. I replied, "That doesn't mean anything," she said. But her voice was softer now, less defensive. "People say things. They don't always mean them." "What happened with the last one?" I asked gently. "The third caregiver." Olivia was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe she wouldn't answer. But then she did. His name was Marcus. He was kind, you know? Actually kind, not performatively kind. He'd make me laugh. He'd sit and talk to me about his life, and he'd actually listen when I talked about mine. We spent 6 weeks together, and I thought maybe he'd stay. I thought maybe I wasn't as terrible to be around as I believed. She paused, but there was a job opening at a hospital, better pay, benefits. He took it. He told me he had to think about his future, his career. I understood. I do understand. But it still hurt. "That's not about you being difficult," I said. "That's about him making a choice." "Yeah, but the choice wasn't to stay," she said. "So what's the difference?" I didn't have a good answer to that. Not one that would matter anyway, because answers don't fix the kind of hurt that comes from repeated abandonment. By week 3, I realized my original plan was already failing. I was supposed to drift through this job, collect my paycheck, and move on to the next thing. But something about Olivia, about her refusal to be pitied, about her fierce determination to live on her own terms despite everything that was against her, was making me want to stay. We started having better conversations. She told me about her life before the accident. She'd been a photographer, had traveled, had all these plans that had been interrupted in the time it took for a drunk driver to lose control of his car. She told me about the anger at first, the depression that came after, the slow journey toward accepting what had changed and what hadn't. "The worst part wasn't losing my mobility," she said one night. "It was losing my independence. And worse than that was losing people. My friends stopped visiting. My family tried, but I could see how uncomfortable they were. My boyfriend at the time." She paused. "Let's just say he wasn't equipped to handle seeing his girlfriend as damaged goods." "You're not damaged," I said. "I know that now," she replied. "But it took me a long time to get there. And it took people like you, people who stayed long enough to treat me like a whole person instead of a tragedy." "People like me?" I asked. "Olivia, I'm just doing the job." She looked at me with those sharp eyes. "You're more than that, and you know it." I felt something shift in my chest. A recognition, maybe, or fear, because I was starting to understand that I didn't want this job to end. I didn't want to leave Olivia. And that terrified me because wanting something meant I could lose it. By week 5, I had confront what was happening. I was falling in love with her. I'd wake up thinking about her. I'd make coffee and think about how she takes it. I'd listen to songs and mentally assign them to her. I was in that early stage where everything reminds you of someone, where the world seems to have been specifically designed to draw your attention back to them. I was also terrified. On a Tuesday night, when Olivia had asked me to help her with her stretches, something that had become almost ritualistic, part of our evening routine, I made a decision. I'd been avoiding telling her how I felt, thinking that it would ruin what we had. But the truth was, I couldn't spend the rest of my life in a job I wasn't qualified for if the real reason I was staying was something I couldn't name. We finished the stretches, and she was sitting on the edge of her bed, slightly breathless from the exertion. I sat down next to her, closer than I usually did. "I have something to tell you," I said. She looked at me warily. "Are you leaving?" "No," I said. "God, no. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. Olivia, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. Not as your caregiver. As someone who's in love with you." She went very still. Her expression didn't change, which made me think I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd ruined everything by saying the thing I wasn't supposed to say. "You can't," she said finally. "I already have. I replied. You say that now, she said, echoing the words she'd said the first day I arrived. But I'm never going to be easy, Thomas. I'm going to have bad days where I can't do anything but lie in bed and feel sorry for myself. I'm going to be frustrated and angry about my body and what I can't do. I'm going to need help with things that are humiliating. And one day, you're going to wake up and realize that being with me is too much. Maybe, I said, but that's a choice I want to make. Not because I'm obligated, because I choose you. She looked away from me, and I could see her jaw working, like she was chewing on words she didn't want to say. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, I said. I'm scared too. What if I'm not enough? She asked. You're more than enough, I said. I reached out and took her hand. You're exactly enough. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were full of tears. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said. I'm not going anywhere. She kissed me then, and it tasted like fear and hope and the kind of vulnerability that only comes when you finally decided to stop protecting yourself. My 6-week contract ended on a Thursday. That morning, I didn't pack my suitcase. Instead, I sat down with Olivia at the kitchen table and told her that I wanted to renegotiate. I didn't want to be her caregiver anymore. I wanted to be her partner. I wanted to figure out our life together. I wanted to stay. She cried, not the sad kind of tears, but the kind that come from relief. The kind that come when you realize someone is choosing you, not the version of you that needs help, but all of you exactly as you are. 3 years later, I wake up next to her every morning. We've built a life that looks different from what either of us probably imagined, but it's ours. She's working again, modified photography work that she can do on her own terms. I've found work that's more stable, that allows me to be present in our life together. We have bad days. We have great days. We have days when nothing is easy and everything hurts, and we just hold each other and get through it. But I never leave. And sometimes, when she's having a particularly hard day, when she's frustrated with her body or caught in that old narrative about not being enough, I remind her of what I told her that first day. That she's not difficult to be with. She's worth staying for. She's worth choosing over and over again. Because that's what love is, I've learned. It's not the absence of hard things. It's choosing to stay through them. It's showing up on days when you don't feel like it. It's believing in someone even when they've stopped believing in themselves. And it's knowing, with absolute certainty, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more Heartfelt tales, and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Thanks for being part of the Unscripted Hearts community.